Today we're diving into some of Mexico's unwritten rules. Things that might not be immediately obvious, but could make a big difference when you're trying to blend in and avoid coming across as rude.
That's right. Whether you're visiting or planning to live here, understanding these subtleties can help you navigate everyday situations like a local.
First up, formalities. In Mexico, greetings are more than just a hey or a handshake. It's polite to greet people with a buenos dias, good morning, buenas tardes, good afternoon, or buenas noches, good evening. Even if you're simply passing a stranger on the street, not doing so can make you look rude.
Yeah, that happened to me, and I learned it the hard way. That one time that I went to the supermarket and I was looking for an item, I don't remember what it was. I went to the employee at the supermarket and I said, "Excuse me, where can I find the item?" And he looked at me like, man, this guy is rude. And he said, first thing he said was, "Buenos dias. You can find the item in aisle whatever it was." But he was really bothered by the fact that I didn't start my conversation by saying buenos dias to him first.
Yeah, you'll find that if you're asking a question and you first greet them, buenos dias, buenas tardes, whatever it may be, you will get a big smile and they'll say it back to you, and then you ask where the certain item is or where you're trying to go, what you're trying to find. People would be much more receptive to you if you greet them politely. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
For example, at the bank, I will see a foreigner standing in line and they get to the window and they just want what they want and they want it now. That's just not the way you do it here. You look them in the eye and you say, "Hi, good morning, how are you? Okay, I would like to make a deposit." And that really goes a long way.
It really
for
does.
people wanting to help you and be courteous back to you, I find. Otherwise, you just come across as rude.
And you'll get much better service that way too.
Also, for women or for friends, a light kiss on the cheek is common when greeting someone. Even for the very first time. If you skip this, you might seem cold, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you don't just go to a total stranger and give them a kiss on the cheek. But if you're being introduced to somebody, it's very normal to do the handshake or the slight hug and the kiss on the cheek.
Yeah, it's very customary, I think, in Mexico and all Latin American countries to do that. And I've noticed that growing up in Latin families, we grew up doing that with all of our aunts, uncles, friends of the family, and everyone. So to us, it was very natural, and that's what we did at home anyway. But I've noticed even with guests that arrive to the B&B, and we'll greet them and check them in, they'll put out their hand and give you a nice big handshake, but there's no hugging or kissing. And when we get national tourists, they will give you a hug and kiss, even if you're meeting them for the very first time. It's just the way we do it here.
Keep in mind, it's not a wet kiss on the cheek.
No.
It's kind of a side kiss.
It's like a side, cheek to cheek kind of a thing. Oh, so nice to meet you.
Hey,
Hi.
likewise.
Like that. Fast, easy. It's not a big wet kiss. You really don't touch lips to their cheek. You kind of just touch cheek to cheek.
When addressing someone in Mexico, it's common practice to speak to someone you've just met using a polite title such as señor for a man, señora for a married or older woman, and señorita for a young or single woman. When speaking with professionals, Mexicans almost always use the person's professional title, such as doctor, doctora for doctor, arquitecto, arquitecta for architect, ingeniero, ingeniera for engineer, and even licenciado or licenciada for somebody who has a college degree.
Yeah, they take the titles very seriously here. They go to school and they earn it, right? So you have to call them by their title. That's the polite way to do it. Saying gracias is very common in Mexico. For example, when exiting a bus, people will often thank the driver. Also, when you're leaving a store, you would typically turn back to the shopkeeper and say gracias, buen dia. Even if you were in there for just a minute or for a quick browse, like you walk into a store and you walk around and you didn't see anything you like, you still address the shopkeeper and you say, muchas gracias, bonito dia. And if you don't, you just look rude.
Yeah, you have to remember, Anywhere you are, at all times, you have to acknowledge the person around you, the people around you.
Yeah, and even in Mexico, probably all of Latin America, you walk into a store and there'll be other people and people will say hi to everyone in the store. You just say, buenas tardes, and then everybody will go, buenas tardes. People from the United States aren't so used to that, but it's just customary.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this video. It's for you, so you can really come to Mexico and really blend in as a local.
I find when I go back to San Francisco to visit my family that, for example, I'll get into an elevator and my gut instinct is to say, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. And I remember going home and doing that every once in a while, and people look at you like, you are weird. Like, why are you talking to me? I don't know who you are. It feels strange how not so friendly people can be.
Yeah, this is actually a topic for another video that we could do about reverse culture shock. So when we go back to the States the next time, we'll really pay attention to those differences.
There is also an unwritten rule when it comes to sending messages. Texting is much more formal, don't you think?
Yeah.
Than what we're used to in the US?
In the States, it might be weeks since the last time you communicated with somebody, and then you might have a question for that person and you would pick up your phone and go straight to the question. Whereas in Mexico, you have to start with, hi, John, how are you? How have you been? How's your mother?
You don't have to ask him how's your mother.
Maybe not that far.
But you do have to say, hi, John, how are you? How have you been?
Yeah.
Then you ask the question. That's how it is in Mexico. Even to the staff or to the accountant or whatever. I just want to ask a question.
Yeah.
And you always have to say, hi, so-and-so. You always have to start with hello. Even, it doesn't matter. And then if you haven't spoken to them for a while, you have to say, how are you? How have you been? Hopefully this message finds you well. Then you ask your question.
Yeah, and then you have to follow up that question with a thank you. It's just common practice here.
Yeah. Have you experienced any cultural surprises while living or traveling in Mexico or anywhere else in the world? Share them in the comments below. We'd love to hear about them. Now let's talk about food etiquette. In Mexico, you always eat tacos with your hands. It's hard for me to do, I don't know why. And most dishes with tortillas, which people often use to make tacos.
But how do you eat tacos not with your hands?
I find that, you can get maybe a few bites of the taco, and if it's a long one, then you kind of put it through your finger, and so all the juice doesn't come out, right? Like that, But then eventually the tortilla will start breaking down on you unless you eat it super fast. So then eventually I end up just using my knife and my fork. But you do the best you can with your hands.
Yeah.
That's customary to eat tacos with your hands.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you might see some Mexicans eat pizza with a knife and a fork, which is what I do. And speaking of pizza, don't expect to get chili flakes and Parmesan cheese with your pizza here. Instead, you'll probably get ketchup or creamy red sauce that Mexicans all call chimichurri, which is different from the Argentinian chimichurri. Also, if someone says a salsa isn't spicy, be cautious because it might still feel spicy to you. I always say, put a little bit on the side of your plate, try it first before you just pour it onto your taco or whatever your meal is, just to make sure the spice level is okay for you.
Yeah, because even the salsa that they say isn't spicy will burn a little bit.
Yeah, they will be spicy.
Yeah, which I love spice, so for me, the hotter the better, but a lot of people that aren't used to it just can't handle it.
Yeah.
So don't be caught off guard there. Now let's talk about mealtime. At the start of the meal, you say to everyone at the table, buen provecho, or you can shorten it to provecho. It's the same as saying bon appetit or enjoy your meal. The most common response is gracias, buen provecho, or simply provecho. If you really want to sound like a native, you can say the diminutive provechito, which is simply an endearing way of saying it.
I think all of Latin America likes to make everything small.
Yeah.
So a café es un cafecito, un taco es un taquito, everything, un pan es un pancito.
Or panecito, depending on the region.
We always have the debate of pan, or when we say pan, we say panecito or pancito. I always say pancito.
Yeah, Spanish speakers out there, what do you say? We'd be curious to help us solve this debate.
We always do. In my household, it was always pancito.
Yeah.
In your household, it was always panecito. Both are correct. And they're both used in Mexico.
Well, I think one or the other is grammatically correct, but there are regional differences, and we still are trying to sort that one through.
It's also very common for people to say buen provecho in restaurants to total strangers. So say you're at a table eating your meal and someone walks by you and sits at the table next to you. When they walk by you, they will say buen provecho or provecho, and it's very nice when you say that. So if you say that to a table in a restaurant, you will get really nice responses and they'll look back at you and say gracias.
Unless their mouth is full, and then they'll do this like. We'll talk about that later. This brings us to the next unwritten rule, non-verbal communication. This is huge in Mexico. You might not always catch the meaning right away, but getting familiar with the common hand gestures will help you blend in. For instance, that little finger nod that I just did when responding to provecho is used as an acknowledgement.
So a lot of people in Mexico, I don't know if they do this in Latin America or if it's just a Mexican thing.
I think it's a Mexican thing.
I learned this a long time ago from a friend. So let's just say you're eating with friends and everybody's mouth's full and someone says something and you want to say an agreement like, yes, that's right. You just do your finger like this and you go.
Yeah, it would be similar to us up north going like this, but it's done with the finger.
Finger.
It's a subtle way of saying yes without words. Am I right?
I don't know if it's like non-verbal communication slang version.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know the origins of it, but I don't think that the older crowd does it. I think it's like the younger crowd does
I don't know. That's a good question. You guys know? Let us know.
Does anybody know? Because we learned this years ago, but we don't know where it came from. Now for no, this one's pretty straightforward. Raise your index finger and wag it side to side. No difference there. It's a polite way to decline without having to speak. And while we're on the subject of dining out, if you want the check, you don't need to call the waiter. Just get his attention and raise your hand and make the motion like you're writing something. It's the universal sign for check, please.
If you're discussing prices or negotiating, you might see someone make the money gesture, where the index finger and the thumb form a U shape. It's a common way to indicate cost or that something is expensive.
You might see people extend their thumb and their pinky with the rest of the fingers tucked in and bring their thumb toward their mouth. It's a fun way to say, let's have a drink without saying a word.
If something is far away, people may wave their hand outward at forehead level like this. It's a good way to indicate a long distance when giving directions.
If you're holding up an index finger, it means the number 1, not wait. So to ask someone to wait, Mexicans will bring their thumb and their index finger together like this to demonstrate the gesture. It's like a little bit gesture you might see in other countries, but here it means hold on just a moment like this. So like sometimes the San Miguel streets are very narrow, so it's just for one car. Someone will stop in front of you to offload something and they'll look at you and they'll go like this. And then you're like, okay, they're just gonna be here for a moment. Whereas in the States, if you do this, that just means like, give me a moment, give me a minute. You know?
Hold on a minute.
Hold on a minute. That's not the same here. You need to do this.
Another gesture you'll see a lot is the thank you gesture, which is like this. You bring your hand, your palm facing you. It reminds me of the old days when people used to wear hats and they would tip the hat. Thank you. I think that's maybe where it came from.
I'm not sure.
It makes sense. If anybody knows the origin, let us know. But basically it's this. So for example, if you're driving in the street and you let a pedestrian go by, the pedestrian will do this as he walks across the street, acknowledging that he's thanking you.
Also, if you're driving and someone lets you go first, then you always give the thank you. Having lived in the US for most of our lives, I always tend to do like this, like thank you, you letting me by, thank you for letting me in. And that's just wrong and it might be misinterpreted. Stop or hello, but to say thank you, it's this motion,
Yep.
right? I still can't get used to that one, but I try. Now let's talk about dining out. You might find yourselves being turned away from a restaurant that is completely empty. It isn't because they don't want your business. It's because all the tables might be already reserved. In Mexico, the meal experience is not rushed like it is in the US. it's not about how many tables are you going to turn over in a night. It's once a person gets their table, it's yours for the rest of the night. So they fear that if I have a reservation coming in at 8 o'clock and it's now 6:30 and you're like, but there's that table, it's empty, why can't I sit there to eat? And they say it's reserved. They think that you're going to sit down and you're going to take the table for the rest of the night, and you can't. So a lot of the times what we'll do is we'll say, hey, what time is the reservation? 8 o'clock. Well, it's 6:30 and we're just going to eat and we're going to leave. We promise. We're not going to linger. And they're like, okay, sit down and eat.
Sometimes.
A lot of the times you can communicate that and tell them, I'm just going to sit, we're just going to eat and we're going to go. We understand that you have a reservation and we will not overstay.
Yeah.
And it's not a problem most of the time.
Yeah, if they have a bar, it's a pretty safe bet that you can actually get seated there. So if you see a bar and you don't mind sitting at the bar, you could choose to sit there too.
When people finish their meal, the waiter will not come to the table with the check. The table is theirs for the night and they will not be rushed. And if you're not aware of this custom, you might feel ignored, but that isn't it at all. It's if you don't ask for your check, you're not going to get your check. And it's their way of not rushing you.
Yeah, they're respecting your time at the table. They're not going to try to get you out of there so that somebody else can come in. It's your table for the night. Don't misinterpret that as them ignoring you.
Yeah, you just have to get used to asking for the check and they'll be happy to bring it to you. But otherwise, they just won't bring it.
While tipping is expected, it's different from the US, where a standard tip these days is 20% or more. Or Europe, where you round up to the nearest euro. In Mexico, a tip of 10 to 15% is typical, depending on the service. Most Mexicans tip 10%. San Miguel de Allende is unique in that because of the foreign influx, it's become almost standard to tip 15%, but the rest of Mexico is still at 10%. In some casual places, however, like taco stands, it is not customary to tip, but a small tip is always appreciated.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever gone to a taco stand and not given them, I don't know.
If it's 23 pesos, maybe we give them 25 or 30.
Or you give them something. You just give them something.
Yeah. Here's one you might not know. Public restrooms in Mexico often don't have toilet paper in the stalls. You either grab some at the entrance or bring your own. Also, public restrooms are usually not free. You'll pay 5 to 10 pesos depending on where you are. Once you pay, the bathroom attendant hands you a strip of toilet paper and sometimes paper towels to dry your hands. The bathrooms are often basic, but you'll find them very, very clean because there is that attendant that's always there maintaining the bathroom.
If it's a bathroom where you pay, then most likely it's going to be cleaner than one that isn't attended to, that's completely free and it's just dirty and a total mess.
Yeah.
So it's very customary to pay 5 to 10 pesos at a bus station, at a gas station.
At a gas station.
Things like that.
Yeah.
All restaurants, of course, have their own bathrooms and you don't have to pay for those. And in many places, you're expected to throw the toilet paper in the trash bin instead of flushing it. It can feel really unusual and strange to throw it into the trash can that's next to the toilet, but it's important to keep the plumbing functioning smoothly. So you have to keep going with the flow on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you don't want to clog the toilet.
No, and that could be a little off-putting when you walk into a stall and you see a trash can full of dirty toilet paper, but that's how it is.
Also, be very careful which restroom you enter. You'll usually see an H and an M on the doors indicating the sex. Now, men do not confuse the M to mean men. M stands for mujeres, which means women. So M is for mujeres and H is for hombres.
I have to admit, when we first moved here and we went someplace, I don't remember where we were, I saw the M and I went straight to the M.
I've done that.
Quickly realized I was in the wrong bathroom. Very embarrassing. Don't make that mistake. Now let's talk about Mexico's unofficial dress code. In Mexico's interior regions like San Miguel de Allende, where we are, Oaxaca, Mexico City, etc., people typically do not wear shorts in the streets, unless they're going to the gym or participating in sports. There is no bigger giveaway that you're a tourist than wearing shorts in the streets, even in high temperatures.
Now, that doesn't mean that you can't come here on a hot day and not wear shorts. You can wear shorts. No one's gonna look at you funny because you're wearing shorts.
They'll just know you're a tourist.
But even that, it's not even a big deal that they know that you're a tourist. You're free to wear shorts. It's not that you cannot. It's just that the locals don't. They will be wearing jeans most likely or some type of pant, but the Mexican men don't wear, most of the time they don't wear shorts unless it's super hot outside. They'll wear like longish shorts. And that's more the youth, I think. So it's not that you cannot wear shorts as a tourist when you visit the interior part of Mexico, because you definitely can. You can go to restaurants with shorts. It's not a big deal. It's just that you'll see that the locals don't do it. That's all. And also, if you're going to be going into the churches and a lot of the monuments and things like that, you should just be conscientious. Also, you won't see men walking around without a shirt. Not like in the beach communities. I think that's it's so hot and humid. Guys walk around without a shirt on. But here you'll never see somebody without a shirt on. And wearing fanny packs or flip-flops might mark you as a tourist in urban areas, but who cares? You can wear fanny packs and flip-flops if you want to. Now let's talk about time perception in Mexico. Time is flexible here. Being a little late is acceptable, especially for casual gatherings. So don't stress if you arrive 15 to 20 minutes late to anything. Even up to 30 minutes is okay.
Yeah, in fact, if you arrive 30 minutes after, people will think you're early most of the time.
But we usually arrive to parties on time or 5 minutes early. We can't break that habit. We have not been able to break that habit, and I don't think I ever can, because I'm one that arrives on time to everything, and that's just the way I was brought up. It also isn't uncommon for stores or shops to also open a little bit late. So you might look up on Google that this store opens up at 10 a.m. It does not mean they're going to open up at 10 a.m. I always just assume that they're going to open at least 10:30, maybe even 11. So don't ever count on the Google times being correct.
Yeah, and in places of the country where siesta is still observed, where shops shut down from 2 to 4, the same thing applies there. Don't show up at 4 thinking that the place is going to be open. They probably won't reopen until at least 4:30.
4:15, 4:30.
Yeah.
But not right at 4. So yeah, we've gotten used to that.
That said, for formal appointments or business meetings, it's best to be on time. There's a difference between Mexican time for social events and punctuality in professional settings. You're also expected to arrive at your doctor's appointment on time. However, expect the doctor to be late.
Yes, always. We have rarely gone to a doctor's appointment where we are seen at the time that they give us, but if you're late, that's a problem. But if they're late, it's totally okay. There's also a very common word that you hear a lot here in Mexico, and it's ahorita, which translates to right now. But in Mexico, ahorita could mean right now, but it could also mean in an hour, tomorrow, or 2 days, maybe never. When you hear this, just know that the person will eventually get around to it, but you just don't know exactly when that's gonna be.
Another tipping situation that might surprise you is baggers at supermarkets and parking attendants. They usually are not employed by the stores, and they rely on our tips. So it's common to tip them a few pesos for their help. If you see a person in a parking lot guiding you out of the parking spot, even if you know you can do it yourself, remember to tip them a few pesos.
It's a very small gesture, but much appreciated. Keep a handful of coins handy when you're out running errands. I always make sure that I have enough coinage in my purse, because you will be giving out pesos here and there all day long when you go out to do things. It's just the way it is. Now let's talk about another one that might surprise you. Terms of endearment, or nicknames based on appearance. In Mexico, people use words like güero for someone light-skinned or blonde, negro for someone with dark skin, gordo for chubby, flaco for skinny, chato for someone with a small nose as an affectionate nickname. This has always been kind of difficult for me.
Yeah, because we come from a country where you don't call people by names by the way they look.
No.
It's considered rude, but here it's not.
It's not. Yes. So I remember, for example, like your mom, who's from Guatemala, there was a painter, and he was really heavy. And she would call him flaco, which means skinny. And I would just cringe every single time she said it, but it's okay to do that here.
Yeah. And most people would give the nickname of gordo to somebody who's fat. It's very normal. It's accepted. It's not rude. And
yes. If you're short, you call someone chaparro, which means shorty. So yeah, it's completely accepted here, but I think that's one that we leave to the locals.
Yeah. Meals in Mexico follow a different schedule than in many other countries. The biggest meal of the day is comida, which is typically eaten between 2 and 4. Some restaurants don't even open until 2, and some fast food restaurants serve breakfast until 1 or 2. So if you find yourself at the Golden Arches at noon, you'll be eating McMuffins.
Which is weird, isn't it?
It's different. Again, it's a different culture, it's a different place, and that's the way it works here. Dinner or cena is usually much lighter and eaten later in the evening, sometimes as late as 9 or 10. If you're used to having dinner earlier, you're going to have to adjust.
And usually dinner consists of just a bite of something. It's not a big meal. Usually they'll have like one little taco or a piece of bread with something to drink. That's what dinner is, because 2 to 4, the comida. So that's their big meal of the day.
Yeah.
And then cena is a light something. Mm-hmm. I remember when I would go to Petatlan as a kid to visit my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. Yeah, 2 to 4 we would have the big meal of the day, and then at night they would buy little taquitos. And we would have 1 or 2 of those with something to drink, and that was around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and then that was it. And then off to bed you went around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Yeah. Breakfast in Mexico may or may not consist of eggs, and usually do not contain ham or bacon. It is more common for Mexicans to eat tamales, atole, which is a corn drink, chilaquiles or enchiladas, among other things, and some dishes may even have chicken. Like you might order chilaquiles with chicken on top or enchiladas with chicken inside. They don't really eat bacon every day or ham every single day for breakfast.
We've just scratched the surface. We could write a book on this subject, but we hope this at least gets you closer to understanding some of Mexico's unwritten rules that can help you avoid cultural misunderstandings.
Remember that being polite and showing respect goes a long way. Whether you're a visitor or a long-term expat, being respectful and courteous is number 1.
And with that, see you in the next video.
Bye, everybody.